Good morning. I'm going to start by presenting the proposal that we had for our capstone, and it's pretty simple, and it's this. You will not attract top talent if your current employees do not believe in the value of your product. Let me say that again. You will not attract top talent if your current employees don't believe in the value of your product. Let me tell you a story that occurred for my company. In 2023, we had gone out and we were going to hire 10 new graduates. We were looking for some for our engineering department. And so we followed our normal process. We went out, we toured on campus, we went to career fairs at 5 major colleges. We ended up with about 100 people that we spoke to while we were on campus. From that group, we had 23 that we were going to bring on site. And we followed our normal process when we do those on-site interviews, is we will put together a group of young engineers that are already current employees, and we will have them visit with our candidates. And we'll have them talk about their jobs, and we'll have them talk about their roles and kind of how they feel about their company. And so we go through our normal process, we finish the interviews, and at the end of that, we make 9 offers to those 23 candidates. 7 immediately declined. When we talked to the ones that declined, they said it fell into 2 main categories for the reasons they declined. One was that we're not sure that we can see having a full career in an industry that may not be here forever. The second one was, we're not sure that we see your company and your industry as a place that fits our life goals, that fits our career goals. So you might be asking yourself, well, how does that tie into your original proposition? So we had an after-action review where we discussed, do we need to change how we're doing our interviews? Do we need to change our processes? Is there something that's going wrong? During that after-action review, we actually met with this young group of internal engineers that were already employees. And we said, what were the topics that came up? You know, what did you share? What was discussed? What questions did they ask? And what was especially telling was during those interviews, we found out that our own internal employees shared those same concerns. They had other reasons for wanting to be a part of our company. My family lives here. This is the place that I wanted to work. We had one recently, one of the 2 that did say yes was actually, he said, my whole family is from Lawton, Oklahoma. I never thought I'd find an engineering job here. And so that's why he said yes. So what it taught us was this. The after-action review taught us that if your own employees do not see the value of the product that you provide, it's very unlikely that they're going to inspire others to see that value. And so that's why we've settled on the solution that we have, and that is to begin this effort by providing and developing an education program for our internal employees. This program would help the employee to see not just the value of the natural gas industry, but also the value that they individually provide and how they contribute to that value. When we invest in educating our employees, from our field operators to our corporate staff, we are empowering them to be ambassadors, not just for your company, but also for the industry at large. And we are helping them so that they can explain the questions that get asked. They can then explain how natural gas actually supports renewable energy. It provides a reliable, clean backup power for renewable energy. They can explain how natural gas also creates jobs. It fuels industry. It actually keeps the cost of energy lower for families. Internal education strengthens not only our collective knowledge, but also our credibility. It fosters a sense of pride and purpose so that your employees can see that bigger picture, and they can see that what they do, it does far more, it's far greater than just pipes and production. And so as we move through this presentation, what I want you to see is this. I want you to see that, number 1, this is why this education matters. I want you to see, number 2, this is how this education should look. And number 3, I want you to know that this education will allow each of your employees in your organization to be able to express their confidence in the value that natural gas provides, not just for our company, not just for our industry, but for our nation as a whole. Judge.
Thank you, Vernon. So a couple of things we want to, as we begin this conversation around how we build the workforce of the natural gas future, Vernon shared a very impactful story. And I think one of the things we learned over this last 18 months is that all of us have a story of some form or fashion in that matter. And when we began to talk as a team and as a group about this, there were 5 key aspects that came out. There were fears about the energy transition, right? What does it look like, and how do we find a space and a place for natural gas in the energy transition? There were concerns about job security. Will we have an industry that will be here? As we're going to recruiting fairs and engaging young engineers and young talent and young HR professionals and young marketing professionals, how do we ensure and empower and instill them that we have an industry that's going to be here for the long haul? There's challenges and concerns around public perception and policy, right? How we engage with our regulators and how we engage in various different states and LDCs. There are legitimate concerns and entities that do not want us to exist. Technological innovation. You've heard conversations around demands for energy from artificial intelligence and other challenges in our industry around emissions reductions, right? Legitimate concerns there. And lastly, economic viability. Folks are concerned, right, that natural gas will not be there, will not be able to provide a sustainable life for them and their families. So as we begin to move further into our portion of the presentation, we thought it prudent that as we focus our efforts around employee development and empowering and challenging our employees, we thought it prudent to break it down into 3 respective employee groups. Looking at our field-facing personnel, looking at our front office and back office personnel, and lastly, focusing on our executive leadership and thinking intimately about what each of these individual groups need. So our field folks, very simply, they need to understand the power and the reliability and sustainability and the safety of natural gas. They need to recognize how abundant and affordable and reliable natural gas is. They need to understand the community impact that natural gas utility companies and that upstream, midstream, and downstream entities have as we look to engage and invest in the communities that we serve. Folks want to see that the business that they work for is active in the communities where they live, work, and play. Lastly, these frontline folks need to have those employee skills and talent development in order to ensure that they're prepared for the future. As we move along that employee spectrum and we look at our front office and back office personnel, our engineering, our HR, our marketing personnel, they need very similar aspects, right? They need to understand that there's a focus on environmental sustainability. They need to understand that we're looking to actively promote innovation and technology within industry. And again, they need to understand that there's opportunities for career growth and development, and that we have the skills and the talents to help them get along that path. When we're focusing on our executive leaders, they need to understand very similar things, right? They need to have a focus on strategic partnerships and how we can engage with various aspects of our communities to ensure that we're building those relationships to ensure that we'll be here for the long haul. They need to understand and have a focus around stakeholder engagement and what it means to be an executive leader and how you look to leverage those relationships to move the business forward. And lastly, hopefully you're noticing a theme here, they need to be able to promote clear vision around leadership development. And I champion ANGE here as something that is actively doing this for us today. So before I transition, I'll share a brief quote here from Mercer North America, a human resources organization. They did a study in 2023 that engaged energy companies. And there were a few key things that energy companies said that they need in their employees, but that they have concerns these skill sets are not readily available. They want folks to have self-management, digital dexterity, people development, and creativity. But they're also very confident that the skill set is not currently present or is not being properly developed in their personnel, providing challenges for us to ensure that we may not be able to bridge those gaps for the future. So as we look forward and move on, we'll talk a little bit more about employee retention and what are some of the steps that we should take to ensure that we're preparing our frontline personnel, our leaders, and our executive leaders for the future.
All right, so retaining top talent has become more challenging than ever. Employees, they want to continue to grow, they want to continue to be challenged, and more importantly, they want a clear path. They want a clear path throughout their organization as far as what that looks like. And you know, oil and gas skills are in high demand. They're in high demand, and while 87% of the workers will be looking for a new career or a new position within the next year, 61% of those individuals would like to stay in the oil and gas industry, while 40%, half of those would like to continue to work in the energy sector. So employee development, we think about employee development, it's continuous work. Some of the challenges that we see, or some of the feedback that we have received, is poor communication. Poor communication from their leader, and they're appreciated employees and limited career advancement opportunities. So we think about many companies participate in a Gallup survey. Gallup surveys are completed throughout the United States, and anybody that participates in a Gallup survey, Gallup identifies 3 different employees. You have an engaged employee, you have a not engaged employee, and an actively disengaged employee. And what's interesting is, based on 2024 studies and the numbers that came back from that survey, 31% of our workforce are engaged. 31%. That says 69% of our workforce is not engaged or actively disengaged. And so we feel like our employees, our work group, should have a personalized playbook for clear understanding of their role, their current role, and also throughout the organization. And so what does a playbook look like? As I go through what the playbook might look like, I want you just to think, how can you as a leader utilize this playbook for succession planning? Succession planning within your work group, finding your replacement, and making sure that we're holding each other accountable, not just the employee, but the leader, to help them reach their full potential. So you see the playbook here. Playbook, personalized playbook for each employee. This is going to be the leader and the employee having one-on-one conversations, understanding their core competencies and strengths while understanding their short and long-term goals. Industry collaboration. Playbook would provide the employee, equip the employee with tools to collaborate with leaders to set actionable goals. Resource allocation. You think about resource allocation, you think about the employees. The employees would create their own board or personal board of directors. The board of directors would be trusted peers, industry leaders to help guide and support them throughout their career. Culture of ongoing learning. Learning, understanding our culture is so important, and this is an opportunity for that employee to refer back to that playbook, but also for the leader to talk about the company culture, help them understand the company culture, and also dedicated space for mentorship, leadership development, and tracking their progress throughout their career. Maintaining momentum. This is important. When we think about maintaining momentum, we have to keep ongoing conversations have to take place. Ongoing conversations have to take place to where we're helping the individual understand where they're at, the things that they need to work on, stretch assignments that might help them and benefit them to hit their short and long-term goals. But then there also has to be formal check-in meetings with these individuals. Just not checking the box. It's a formal check-in to make sure that they're on track, to make sure that they're hitting their targets, but it also gives the employee the opportunity to recalibrate if they feel like they need to go in a different direction. And then power of investing in people. We as leaders have the responsibility to make sure that our employees are equipped with the tools and resources to do their best, to bring their best to work every day. And so by doing that, it's going to provide continued support. We have to make sure that we are checking in with our employees, again, holding each other accountable, but it doesn't stop when they walk through the door. It's ongoing. It's going to be conversations as they continue their career within the organization.
So if you think about how we take empowered employees and put them out into the world that we live in to make them ambassadors for natural gas, it really comes down to, there's a lot of research that shows that employees are the very best advocates for our industry, and the reason for that is relationships. And honestly, as I look around at this room and I think about each of you, I think that's probably what I'll miss most about this class when we end today, is the relationships with each of you, the relationships with these guys. These are probably some of my closest friends now. They could tell me that Keith was the most interesting man in the world. And at the beginning of class, I went, I don't know, that's doubtful. Today, I trust them. I know he is the most interesting man in the world. But it really has to do with those relationships that we've built over time and the relationships that you all have in the communities and the places where you work, live, and interact. Your clubs that you're involved in, your kids' sports that you're involved in, the churches, the different society things that you do. That's a place where you show up with your company logo on and somebody says, well, what's that? And you can talk to them about, this is what it is, this is what I do, this is the value that our industry brings. And there's a ton of research that shows that is super effective at attracting top talent and engaging our employees and fostering that interest in our industry. It's also, selfishly for companies, extremely low cost if you think about the cost of us just living everyday life and actually having to pay for traditional marketing media. So not only is it cheaper, but it's just so much more effective. I think the biggest thing that we have to do though is to make sure that we're equipping employees to do exactly that, to leverage those relationships in order to be advocates for our industry, and kind of using the acronym GEAR, gearing our employees for this. But how do we train, equip, and send employees out into our communities, our local communities, to interact with people? And I'm reminded every Sunday when I leave church, our pastor says at the end, before we all leave, says, you're not just dismissed, you're sent on mission. And I love that idea. It's like you're not just leaving, you're sent with a purpose, you're sent with a mission. And I think when we leave work, that is absolutely one of our missions that we could do, is to advance our industry through our conversation, through our relationships. And so if companies can equip employees with the resources, ground them, what's our story? How are we driving sustainability? How are we leveraging innovation and technology? How are we making the world a better place through the product we offer? If we can then equip them with the resources, the elevator pitches, the one-pagers, the things, like social media. And one of the big things that I've noticed is I'm pretty reluctant to post anything on social media because I think everybody can think of the stories as like, well, so-and-so, he pictured, he's posted up with a gun and the Williams logo on it, and we had to take that down. And you're like, I don't think I'm ever going to run to that, but it creates some hesitancy. And Williams has done a great job, and I think other companies too, of providing ways to safely engage in that and promote what we do and the exciting work that we are a part of every day. So activating our employees, giving them the resources, and then rewarding it, recognizing where we have employees stepping out and engaging in public speaking events or participating in conferences or chairing committees. And so that to me is one of the big things that I think we're all passionate about and excited about. I could see that in the room here. We've been together a long time, and every time you guys spoke up, I learned something new. I think that's just us living out that natural gas ambassador, and we do that every day. So companies equipping their employees to do that, I think, is the most effective way for us to do.
So one of the things that we really loved about this kind of topic is it's actually within the company's control to control that narrative and also to engage their employees with this training. It's not something they're relying on external to be able to do or relying on the public to change their mind. It's an internal control system that they can use. One of the other fascinating things we found is there's a lot of business journal articles out there talking about purpose and motivation. In 2019, Forbes had an article that talked about 9 out of 10 employees would be willing to take a pay cut to work at some place that was more purposeful. That's an impact. 90% of our employees would be willing to do that. So it kind of begs that question. Purpose is very commonly connected with why. And so I want to talk a little short story about my why for the oil and gas industry. And it's going to gear around February of 21 with Winter Storm Uri, but it actually starts years before that. And I'll say I started in the industry in 2009. My why was largely driven by growing up. My dad was oil and gas. I loved the quality of life I'd grown up with. I said, hey, that's what I'd like to have for my family as well. And so when I started the industry, that was my motivation. That was my gear. Well, in 2017, 2018, I was part of a team, and we were tasked with installing a pipeline from an existing compressor station to some delivery transmission points, and we were actually looping it. So we had a pipeline on the suction side coming in, we had one existing pipeline going there, and we installed a loop line next to it, which means we had 2 pipes going to those locations. And when we were geared with the scope, what we were asked and kind of directed to is we wanted to be able to take gas from one transmission company, compress it, and send it to others, kind of a marketing initiative. As part of our team, what we got to look at in the design stage is we said, hey, is there an opportunity that we would want to take gas from on the east side and send it back to the west, what was being used as solely as our suction line at that point. And so we kind of put together what would be required to be able to do this from a capital spend perspective, because let's face it, cost benefits, everybody deals with that, right? So when we took it to our stakeholders, we said, do you guys have an interest in having this opportunity? They said, well, what's the cost? We said, it's 2% of the total project. And they said, without any delay, yes, do it. And so this was gas that was the northeast side of Texas, and it had a pipeline that went all the way to the west side of Dallas. And so we went ahead with that. And so when Winter Storm Uri occurred in 2021, a lot of the gas that the company I was with sourced was from the Permian Basin. During that event, a lot of gas was cut off at the wellheads, right? Wellhead freeze-ups, there were other pipeline issues. And so a large part of the gas that was typically supplied to the North Texas area was limited. Well, what we had done on the east side of Texas allowed us to have access to the Scoop and the Stack and other plays that were in Louisiana. So it gave us other resources that we could draw from and pull back to the Dallas area. So what typically that compressor station would do would send about 200 million a day from what used to be just a suction line to those transmission companies. Was actually reversed with the work that we had done in 2017, 2018, and moved 400 to 500 million a day for 4 days straight back to the Dallas Metroplex in order to protect people and livelihoods and heat. And so, early on in my career, my motivation and my why was quality of life for my family. What I got to see from that event in 2021 is we were able to provide gas to numerous homes, hospitals, buildings, and provide heat for people so that they could stay warm. Literally saved lives during that event that took place there in I say Texas because that's where I live. But it changed and altered my why from where it had been to where I was. Originally it was being able to provide for my family. It had changed now as being able to provide for other people's families. And so that has kind of altered my approach and why I want to do the things that I do so that other people can benefit from natural gas as much as I have. So I think that's one of the things that's important as we go through some of this training and education for our employees is helping them identify the why behind what they do, equipping them so that when they go out and talk to people in the supermarket or people in store, or schools or PTA or sports teams, and they ask, well, why do you work there? That they have a compelling and well-voiced argument and discussion of what they're able to do for others around them. One of the things that Ryan had talked about was 60% or almost 2/3 of the employee population is disengaged to some extent in the workforce. Some of the articles that we talk about or we see in business journals as well talk about when you have a motivated employee, the amount of production increases. So even if we were to cut that in half by allowing people to identify their why through some of the training that we offer those employees, now you've got 2/3 of your workforce that would be engaged and much more higher productive for what they can provide for the company. So hope you guys will support us and agree with us that, man, we can control that narrative within our companies to encourage our employees to be more knowledgeable on the topic and also help them to identify their motivation as they go forward in their careers. I guess we'll open it up for some questions now and discussion on the topic.